Revenge with Karen.
"You're too quiet to be dangerous," he said once, smirking over his lukewarm coffee like he was handing me a compliment. That was the moment I knew I'd survived this place longer than him. Quiet? Maybe. But I'd spent 5 years documenting every inspection, every policy waiver, every conveniently forgotten safety review like my job depended on it. Because it did. In compliance, silence isn't submission, it's ammunition. And eventually, someone always pulls the trigger. Our office looked like progress on paper: exposed brick walls, standing desks, collaboration pods no one used. But under the brushed aluminum and mission statements was chaos in a pencil skirt. Most of the execs treated my department like we were optional, like compliance was something they had to pretend to care about for the quarterly audit, then toss back in a drawer until the next one. Wanted software deals with municipal contracts, state transportation systems, even federal logistics pipelines. But they didn't want the boring part, the rules that came with it. That's where I came in. A nobody in flats who could quote state code like scripture and catch a falsified signature at 20 paces. Legal respected me, barely. The finance team tolerated me. HR didn't know I existed unless something exploded. But the C-suite saw me as wallpaper. Necessary, silent, replaceable. But here's the funny part. You know who actually keeps the company from collapsing under a $12M fine because some overpaid exec forgot to run a background check on a subcontractor hauling hazardous materials through 5 states? Not the flashy VP of product. Not the guy who brings vibes and kombucha on tap. It's the woman in the back corner with a spreadsheet, a red flag list, and insomnia. It was me. Every week I submitted quiet reminders. Your reporting timeline is off by 3 days. Your inspection form's missing a third-party sign-off. Your one-click safety checklist is neither safe nor complete. And every week, the responses got shorter, snarkier, and eventually non-existent. By the way, if you're the kind of person who thinks people like me don't have stories worth hearing, well, buckle up. And if you're still listening at this point, me a solid and hit that subscribe button. A like wouldn't hurt either. Seriously, 95% of folks never subscribe, and it means a hell of a lot to our team. Keeps us fueled with caffeine and spite. Mostly spite. Anyway, back to the decay. The shift happened slow, like mold in the fridge. One executive got poached by a unicorn startup. Another left after some whispers about expense reports and a vendor with suspiciously tight yoga pants. The time our 4th COO in 3 years showed up, the building had the scent of desperation covered in vanilla air freshener. The new guy, Brett, walked in with teeth too white and shoes too loud. He called himself a systems disruptor, which I guess is corporate for burns things down and hopes someone else cleans it up. He took one look at our compliance protocols and said, "Looks like we're heavy on bureaucracy." That's gonna change. That Monday, canceled our quarterly internal audit drills. By Wednesday, he slashed our budget. By Friday, he removed the compliance training from onboarding. "We'll bake it into culture," he said with a wink. I laughed out loud. He didn't notice. Still, I did what I always do, documented. I updated my risk matrix. I logged the policy rollbacks. I flagged our public sector contract obligations in bold, underlined red, and I warned them again and again, gently at first, then directly. We're operating out of compliance with state inspection codes. If this goes unaddressed, we're liable. His response: "Thanks, sweetheart. I've got bigger fish to fry." Like I was asking him to fetch a latte instead of preventing a multi-million-dollar shutdown. The thing is, I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I didn't play the victim. That's not how you survive in places like this. I just smiled, copied legal, quietly started backing up every internal memo, inspection log, and deleted Slack message into an encrypted folder with today's date stamped in the file name. I wasn't preparing for war. I was preserving the truth, just in case anyone ever needed it. Brett Danner rolled in like a game show host trying to sell you the future of logistics. All teeth, no substance. His first day, he strutted into the Monday all-hands with a Bluetooth headset and said, "Not a compliance shop. We're a growth machine." The interns clapped. The senior engineers blinked. I marked the day with a sticky note that just said, "And so begins the downfall." By Friday, he'd renamed 3 departments, cut the compliance training line item from HR's onboarding budget, and sent out a company-wide Slack message that read, and I quote, "Too much red tape strangles innovation. Let's get scrappy." scrappy, apparently, and skipping third-party inspections on data transport hardware being installed at 3 government-adjacent facilities. I flagged it, twice. Once to the CIO, once to legal. Their response: a tight-lipped emoji reaction and a CC to Brett. Next week, my training modules vanished from the LMS. Just gone. A year's worth of documentation, learning checks, policy breakdowns, case studies, deleted. When I asked HR what happened, they shrugged. Brett said you'd be creating something more modern soon. I hadn't been told. I hadn't agreed. And no one seemed to care. I walked into his glass-walled office and asked for 10 minutes. He gave me 3. You're the rules gal, right? He said, not looking up from his phone. I'm the compliance manager, I replied, and I'd like to understand the rationale behind suspending our training materials and audits, especially when we're onboarding 2 new state contracts this quarter. He smiled like a man who's never once read the fine print on anything, because they're boring. And no one learns from lectures and checklists. We're modernizing. By skipping legal obligations, I asked. By trusting our people to be adults, he countered. Do you think the state cares if we've checked a box or not? They care if the work gets done. Which it is. Right? Wrong. But I didn't say that. I just nodded and walked out. There's a certain flavor of arrogance that can't be taught out of a man. Brett had a full bowl of it every morning with his protein shake. I went back to my desk and opened our internal compliance wiki to update my notes. That's when I noticed the revisions tab. 2 of my latest policy advisories, flagging unsafe timelines and missing data logs, had been rolled back, erased. No change logs, no discussion, just gone. I dug deeper. 7 previous audit flags I'd marked in the past month, deleted. 4 procedural exceptions I'd escalated to ops, missing. It was like someone had power washed my paper trail, or tried to. But I wasn't new. And I didn't trust the company's cloud any more than I trusted Brett's cologne slick logic. Every policy I ever wrote lived in triplicate, 1 on the server, 1 in a secure backup, and 1 in a private, offline archive only I had access to. That night, I started cross-referencing deleted logs with the contract obligations for our 2 newest state-level clients. Turns out, we were already out of compliance on multiple fronts: missed safety verifications, vendor clearance gaps, incomplete site readiness forms. I drafted a warning memo, bullet-pointed, neutral tone, cited clauses, sent it to Brett, CC'd legal and the COO inbox. No response. 2 hours later, edit access to the audit logs was downgraded. The system now required executive review before publishing updates, so I tried again, a little louder. This time to legal directly. If this isn't reversed, we risk formal breach. They replied the next morning, thanks, noted. Like I'd just told them the break room was out of coffee filters, so I pivoted. If they weren't going to listen, I wasn't going to keep shouting into the void. I wasn't fired yet. That meant I still had access. So I spent every evening for the next week, reviewing every inspection report tied to our government work, looking for holes, and documenting everything. You ever feel like the building is on fire, and you're the only one smelling smoke? That's what it's like working compliance under a COO who thinks regulations are optional. Only I wasn't alone. Not entirely. An old colleague from a prior job pinged me on LinkedIn, recently joined the state regulatory board's internal modernization task force and needed volunteers who understood logistics infrastructure. You know this stuff better than anyone, she wrote. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I said yes. The first meeting with the state regulatory board was held in the back of a library conference room with bad coffee and folding chairs that squeaked like rats in heat. No one wore suits. No one said synergy. It was glorious. I sat across from a former OSHA inspector, a retired civil engineer, and a software analyst who looked like she hadn't blinked since 2009. These weren't move fast, break things types. These were the people who fixed what got broken when the fast movers crashed into something expensive. They welcomed me with open laptops and tired eyes. Why are you here? Someone asked. Because my company thinks rules are optional, I said. No one laughed, just nodded. The arrangement was legal. I made damn sure of that. After-hours volunteering. Unpaid. Clear conflict of interest disclosures. No trade secrets shared. Nothing confidential. I was a citizen helping improve the systems that kept our state's logistics backbone from collapsing under fraud and laziness. If that made me disloyal, then maybe they should have asked why loyalty required silence. Every night after work, I reviewed procedural case studies and cross-referenced our internal gaps with the board's audit models. I wasn't turning them in yet. I was preparing, like a woman quietly buying sandbags before hurricane season while her neighbor insists the storm's a hoax. Back at the office, things got worse. Brett started treating compliance like it was a nuisance he could automate. He introduced something called confidence certification, basically a checkbox on our internal dashboard that said I trust this is complete in lieu of actual documentation. He wanted every department head to click it once a week. No files, no sign-offs, just vibes. I refused to endorse it. Sent a memo detailing how the system lacked verifiability, audit trails, or legal defensibility. He replied with a one-line slack, "Don't overthink. This isn't court." No, I thought, but it will be. That's when I started the archive. A private, encrypted folder, every deleted policy, every unauthorized waiver, every compliance gap left hanging like a snapped seatbelt in a speeding car. I printed hard copies of key files and stored them offsite. I wasn't paranoid. I was experienced. Then came the site inspection incident. We had a scheduled verification at a shipping node in Richmond, a joint contract with the State Transit Authority. I'd flagged the site 6 months earlier for outdated environmental hazard controls. The inspection got delayed, then rescheduled, then postponed indefinitely. On paper, the site still needed to pass 5 key safety checks before we could claim compliance. But on Tuesday, I got a PDF in my inbox marked Final Inspection Approval. The digital signature? Mine. Except I never signed it. I checked the metadata. Someone from Ops had copied my signature from an older document and pasted it into the new form. Sloppy, arrogant, illegal. I walked into Brett's office with the forged form in one hand and a paper copy of our contract clause in the other. "This needs to be retracted immediately," I said. He didn't look up from his laptop. "It's done. It's fraudulent." He finally looked at me. "It's a formality. We needed to show good faith progress, certifying that a site passed inspections it never received. That's not a formality. That's a false attestation under state law." Brett leaned back, smug. "If you're so worried, just file a memo. That's what you do, right? Write little memos." I stared at him for a beat longer than I should have. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to threaten. I wasn't going to play the part of the hysterical compliance lady. Instead, I walked back to my desk, opened a blank template titled Ethical Exception Notice, and formally refused to sign off on the Richmond site. I included the forged file as an exhibit, sent it to legal, CC'd Brett, attached the relevant statute. No one replied. But the next morning, my access to the site inspection folder was revoked, so I printed it, every single document tied to that site, and added it to the archive. It started with a calendar invite that smelled like bait. Quick HR sync 15-min no agenda. The kind of meeting that screams we're documenting this. I wore gray, neutral, forgettable. HR was already in the room when I arrived, Paula, the same woman who once tried to implement Pet Picture Wednesdays to boost morale. She smiled like she was about to euthanize a puppy. "Just a quick chat," she chirped, gesturing to the chair across from her. "We've received some questions, just routine stuff, nothing serious." Nothing serious always precedes something venomous. She opened a folder that didn't need to exist for a quick chat. Inside, a printout of my LinkedIn activity. A timestamped Slack message I'd sent at 6:42 p.m. weeks ago. A screenshot of a regulatory board's public Zoom webinar with my name in the participant list. "Have you been doing any external consulting?" she asked, eyes wide with feigned innocence. "I volunteer with a state oversight task force," I said evenly. "Unpaid, fully disclosed in my annual conflict of interest form. You have a copy on file," she blinked. "Ah, yes." But Brett raised some concerns that perhaps this affiliation could be seen as competitive. "You know, given the nature of our contracts." I smiled without showing teeth. "The nature of our contracts is exactly why I joined." She didn't like that. You could see it in the way she shuffled her folder like she wished it contained a pink slip. Brett's fingerprints were all over this. HR doesn't randomly wake up one morning and start monitoring your Zoom background for logos. This was orchestrated. I left the room with no write-up, no warnings, no formal reprimand. Just a sense, you know the one, when the forest goes too quiet. By Thursday, my project assignments started disappearing from Jira. Reassigned, on hold, redundant. I wasn't told. I wasn't included in the meetings, only found out when someone from Dev pinged me. "Hey, who's handling compliance review now?" Good question. Friday morning, my badge didn't work at the main elevator bay. Facilities told me it was a glitch but couldn't explain why my name had been moved to a different access group labeled Tier 2 Limited. I could still enter the building, but not the executive floor, not the server room, not the compliance records archive. They didn't fire me, tried to erase me, quietly, like digital whiteout. It was almost poetic. I'd spent 5 years warning them what happened when you tried to pretend compliance didn't exist, and now they were pretending I didn't. I could feel the trap closing. Slowly, padded jaws. No teeth, not yet, but I wasn't scared. You only panic when you don't know what's coming. And I did. I had seen this play before, just never from such a tragically underqualified director. Thought they were isolating me. What they didn't realize is that I'd already shifted my energy elsewhere. Every evening, I continued meeting with the state task force, reviewing training protocols, providing anonymized case data, helping refine their auditing algorithm to better flag inconsistencies, like forged digital signatures and missing inspection logs. The very gaps Brett was now mass-producing in our infrastructure. I asked the task force if they ever did spot checks on mid-level software logistics firms with public contracts. The chair smiled. We do now. I never said my company's name. I didn't need to. That weekend, I found another altered form submitted under my credentials, this time tied to a new federal vendor. I saved it, archived it, backed it up twice. Then I forwarded a new memo to Brett's inbox. No CCs, no dramatics. Subject: final clarification on unauthorized use of credentials Richmond, Dallas, and Owens projects. Attached, all the documents he thought had been erased. No reply, of course not, but the silence felt different this time. Not dismissive, defensive. They knew I was still in the building, and they hated it. The calendar invite came in at 3:06 p.m. on a Friday. Subject: alignment touchpoint compliance discussion. No body text, just the meeting link. Host: Brett Danner. Co-host: Paula from HR. Duration: 50 minutes. The corporate equivalent of a bullet with your name on it. I knew what this was. You don't get pulled into a last-minute Zoom titled alignment after a month of being slowly pushed out of your own job unless they're about to professionally erase you. So I dressed for it. Clean button down, no makeup, hair tied back. Expression locked somewhere between bored and bulletproof. I clicked the link 1 minute early. Brett was already there, lounging like a frat boy pretending to be a man. Paula had her "this is hard for us to face" on, though she hadn't looked directly at me in weeks. He didn't waste time. We've completed a thorough internal review, Brett began, sliding into his best corporate executioner tone. And unfortunately, we've identified a serious conflict of interest regarding your extracurricular consulting work. Used the word extracurricular like he caught me doing jazzercise for a rival firm. I said nothing. Given the sensitive nature of our contracts, he continued, and your recent pattern of disengagement, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. Paula jumped in then, bless her HR script. We appreciate your contributions. Your severance and COBRA information will be sent via DocuSign. Please return any company assets by. Muted her, not out of rage, not out of protest, just because I didn't need to hear the rest. Instead, I opened my second monitor, navigated to a folder I'd labeled break glass, dragged a file into a draft email. 2. Redacted at State Board Gov subject. Immediate review pattern of misrepresentation and falsified inspection records. Confidential attachments. 14 PDFs. 6 audio files. 1 spreadsheet. Body. Per prior conversations. Formal documentation attached. Termination occurred at 3:09 p.m. today. I trust you'll find the timeline instructive. I hovered over send, looked back at Brett. He was waiting for me to beg or explain or melt down. That's what men like him always expect, either apology or hysterics. Something they can control. Instead, I smiled. A small, symmetrical thing. And I said, "Thank you for your clarity." He blinked. I hit send. Then I clicked leave meeting, closed my laptop, unplugged the charger, stood up, cracked my back, and walked to the fridge to pour myself a Diet Coke like I had just finished a particularly satisfying yoga class. Outside, it was starting to rain, the soft kind, cleansing. I sat by the window and watched the first drops hit the pavement while my inbox slowly locked itself, remote wiped by IT. I didn't care. Everything that mattered had already been copied, triple backed up, hand-labeled, delivered. They thought this was the end of the story, but they'd just hit print on the first page of the audit. Monday was coming, and with it, every ghost they'd tried to delete. By Saturday morning, the corporate obituary had already made its rounds. She got canned for moonlighting, one Slack message read. Brett caught her consulting for a competitor, another claimed. The spin moved fast, faster than truth ever could. I wasn't surprised. That's what companies do. Control the story before the facts catch up. They wanted it simple, clean, a disloyal employee, a justified termination. No further questions, no internal review. But beneath the click-clack of corporate gossip, a quieter current was shifting. Legal didn't issue a statement. HR didn't post the usual "we wish her the best goodbye" message. No cake. No email thread full of heart emojis and fake nostalgia. Just avoid where I used to be. They didn't want attention. They wanted distance. Which meant, deep down, they already knew. By noon, my work laptop was bricked, wiped remotely. Screen went black mid-scroll while I was double-checking my personal Google Drive to ensure all critical files had synced. I smiled. They were too late. Every file worth saving was already duplicated. Not just stored, but indexed. Labeled by contract number, inspection site, statute reference. I didn't leave breadcrumbs. I left a damn map. I spent the rest of the weekend at my dining table surrounded by open folders, legal pads, and 2 dead pens. I reviewed every site inspection Brett had signed off on in the last 90 days. Dallas, Owens, Richmond. Site 4B was the worst. It had missing HVAC clearance signatures and a falsified emissions form dated 2 weeks before the equipment was even installed. Each file I opened smelled like gasoline waiting on a match. By midnight Sunday, I had what I needed: a timeline of active violations, manipulated documentation trails, and signed attestations that would fail even the gentlest audit review. Not enough to bring the company down, but enough to freeze every public sector contract they currently had pending. And that was enough. I logged into the state board's secure drop portal and uploaded the packet. No commentary, no editorializing, just the truth formatted like a compliance officer's middle finger. I ended the submission with one line: recent termination may indicate obstruction of internal reporting. That's all I had to say. By design, I wasn't allowed to comment further. Once a formal filing is made, the agency takes over. No contact, no back channels, just the ticking clock of procedure and consequence. Still, I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, because I was focused. They fired me for being a threat. Now they'd learn what kind of threat I actually was. Brett had spent his short reign trying to erase the evidence, bury the audits, silence the risk. But systems don't forget. Logs don't lie. And the people who know how to read them, we never leave quietly. At 8:57 a.m. Monday morning, the receptionist at the front desk, Tamara, always polite, always caffeinated, buzzed the executive floor with an edge in her voice. "Hi, I've got 3 gentlemen here from the State Oversight Board. They say they're here for a facility audit." Silence on the line, then a click. By 9 a.m. sharp, 3 regulators in gray jackets and lanyards stepped through the double glass doors like they'd just walked off a courtroom procedural. Not angry, not aggressive, just calm, practiced. The kind of calm that makes guilty people sweat. Brett didn't recognize it yet. He thought it was a misunderstanding. "Gentlemen, I think there's been a mix-up," he said, already reaching for his PR smile. "We've got a formal review scheduled next quarter. You must be early." The lead inspector, older, built like a former linebacker who traded helmets for clipboards, didn't blink. "This isn't a scheduled review, Mr. Danner. This is a surprise inspection. Per State Statute 42A, Section 17, immediate compliance requested." He handed Brett a sealed folder, the kind that comes pre-labeled. Inside, a warrant for site access and a list of required documents. Brett chuckled. "You can't be serious." "We've got meetings, product demos, we're serious," the inspector said flatly. "Please gather your compliance officer." Brett's mouth twitched. "She's no longer with the company." The inspector nodded, so we assumed. He turned to Tamara. "We'll need access to the compliance archives, digital infrastructure logs, and physical inspection reports for all active public sector contracts, starting with Dallas, Richmond, and Owens sites." Tamara blinked, unsure if she should be looking at her boss or the man with the badge. Brett tried to pivot. "Look, I think we should loop in our legal team." The inspector opened his tablet and started reading. The attestation dated April 17th lists HVAC certification for the Owens facility. "Need the raw data logs, inspection photos, and the signature trail." "I will need time to pull that. We'll wait." They moved like a surgical team, quiet, methodical, not a wasted step. By 9:15, IT was scrambling to find badge scan data that hadn't been archived correctly. Legal was texting outside counsel. Paula from HR was nowhere to be found. By 9:30, the inspector reviewing the Richmond file raised an eyebrow. His form's signature is a JPEG overlay. No metadata. Who submitted this? The room went still. Brett stammered something about delegated authority and interdepartmental handoffs, but the inspector wasn't listening to him anymore. He turned to his colleague, nodded once, and muttered, "Matches the tip." "Exactly." Brett looked up. "What tip?" The inspector didn't answer. But I knew. Because across town, I was watching the headlines refresh. Regulatory oversight launches surprise review of key state contractor. And below that, a line that made me set my coffee down slowly. Officials confirmed the audit was triggered by a highly detailed anonymous submission alleging falsified inspection records and internal suppression of compliance reporting. Highly detailed. Anonymous. I didn't need credit. I didn't want it. Watching Brett's world unravel by nothing more than a clipboard, a statute, a locked door policy review, that was the reward. They always thought people like me were harmless, until the paperwork bit back. By Monday afternoon, the building was quieter than a church with a broken air conditioner. You could practically hear the anxiety humming through the walls like exposed wiring. Brett had stopped smiling. Legal had stopped answering calls. And the regulators, they were just getting started. The first crack came at 11:42 a.m., and the systems team confirmed they couldn't generate real-time badge data for the past 60 days. Every request for access logs resulted in a spinning wheel, a timeout error, or a report with empty fields that read null/null/null. The lead inspector didn't raise his voice, just typed something into his notes and said, "That's a data integrity failure. Mark it." They moved on to file audits. The 47 site inspection forms requested across 3 projects. Only 31 were available in any form. Of those, 12 had been altered after submission, 7 had no metadata, and 5 included cut and pasted signatures, mine among them. "Who's the compliance lead on these?" one of them asked. Brett's voice was tight. "She's no longer with the company." Another inspector lifted a folder, flipping it open with latex-gloved fingers. Convenient. 2:15 p.m. One of our biggest clients, Midwest Transport Authority, emailed to say they were pausing deployment pending results of the audit. Their legal counsel requested all third-party site validation logs. We didn't have them. We never had them. Brett had been signing off on faith, then deleting anything that contradicted his progress narrative. The dominoes were falling fast now. 2 more public sector contracts suspended communications. One private client quietly revoked a letter of intent. Procurement requests went unanswered. The Slack channels that used to buzz with "let's circle back and we got this" were now ghost towns. Everyone was waiting, watching, praying they weren't holding the bag when the music stopped. And me? I was sitting at a quiet coffee shop 2 cities over, wearing jeans, sipping green tea, nodding politely as a woman from the Federal Logistics Integrity Office asked if I'd be willing to relocate for a permanent role. "Your background's exactly what we need," she said. "Someone who knows the pressure points inside out." I smiled. "I know where the cracks are, and who dances on top of them." We shook hands. Back at HQ, the walls kept crumbling. The real twist came via text message. 2:38 p.m. from Nicole H. HR associate. "Hey, don't know me, but I saw what's happening. I just want you to know, Brett told us to start cleaning the audit folders 2 weeks ago. He said it was routine, but he specifically said, delete anything that looks unfinished or redundant, especially old compliance stuff. I documented it, thought you should know." I sat back, letting that settle like whiskey in the ribs. It wasn't just negligence. It was obstruction. Intentional, directed, documented. That one message changed the shape of the investigation. What started as a routine audit had just stepped over into legal escalation. Destruction of records, malicious compliance breaches, breach of fiduciary duty tied to federal funds. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The state board already had what they needed. Nicole had just unknowingly handed them the accelerant. Brett built a castle out of cut corners and charm. And now, the whole thing was catching fire. Emergency board meeting was called for 5:00 p.m., that twilight hour when the building should have been winding down, not bracing for collapse. Executives shuffled in with ashen faces and clammy brows, clutching tablets they'd barely had time to skim. Someone tried to order catering. No one touched it. The state oversight team arrived early. They didn't sit. They stood behind the projector screen like federal executioners, waiting for a name to read out loud. Lead inspector, the linebacker in a blazer, didn't waste time. "This won't take long," he said, voice calm but final. "Your firm is in breach of multiple state and federal compliance codes." No one breathed. He clicked through a presentation that felt less like a slideshow and more like a prosecution exhibit. "Falsified inspection logs," he began. As a copy of the Richmond site file appeared on screen, my signature, digitally pasted and timestamped after I'd already refused to sign. 6 counts. Click. Missing environmental clearance forms at the Owens Distribution Center. A scanned PDF came into view, unsigned, undated, backdated. Click. Unverifiable access logs for facility site 4B. Absence of digital signature trail. Badge data corrupted or deleted. Click. Then came the dagger. "In addition, credible evidence has surfaced that your chief operating officer, Brett Danner, ordered the deletion of internal compliance documentation directly tied to government contracts currently in execution." All heads turned to Brett. He tried to laugh. "That's absurd. We have versioning logs. This can't be verified." The inspector raised a hand. "We have the email, Mr. Danner, and 2 sworn statements from staff." Silence fell like ash. A board member finally spoke. "Effective immediately, Mr. Danner is suspended pending internal review." Brett opened his mouth, closed it, sat down. The first time in months I imagine he'd felt gravity. The inspector continued. "Contracts under public funding are now frozen. Regulatory certification is rescinded pending a full audit. Any active deployments must cease within 48 hours. Someone gasped. A marketing exec dropped her pen. The CEO tried to salvage the tone. "We can appeal, surely no." "You can cooperate," the inspector replied. "We escalate to federal review." The screen faded to black. Inside that room, reputation died. Outside it, headlines bloomed. "Key software vendor under state investigation for inspection fraud." "COO suspended following compliance breach." And then, late that evening, a different kind of post appeared. No scandal, no press leak. Just one calm, measured sentence on a blue background. "Proud to join the State Oversight Office full-time. Excited to protect workers and integrity everywhere." No hashtags, no fanfare. Just a name signed beneath it. Mine. The woman they fired for doing her job too well. It went viral within the hour. Every executive who had deleted my memos saw it. Every contractor who'd ignored my warnings read it. And somewhere in a dim office full of chaos and denial, Brett Danner finally realized he hadn't just fired a compliance officer. He triggered an audit with a pulse. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.